LA TheatreWorks presents Judgment at Nuremberg by Abby Mann, directed by Shannon Cochran, starring David Selby, James Morrison, Harry Hamlin, and Kate Steele. Just after World War II, both minor officials and major figureheads of the European Axis powers were found guilty of crimes against humanity. Abby Mann's Judgment at Nuremberg is a masterful meditation on one such trial, in which the very people who should have stood up for justice became the very embodiment of its opposite. And now, Judgment at Nuremberg, produced by LA TheatreWorks.
On January 1st, 2001, then President Clinton signed the Rome Treaty for an international criminal court. He said, "In taking this action, we reaffirm our support for international accountability and for bringing to justice perpetrators of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity based on our involvement in the Nuremberg tribunals that brought Nazi war criminals to justice." Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina called Mr. Clinton's decision as outrageous as it is inexplicable. "I have a message for the outgoing president. This decision will not stand." Many others echoed Senator Helms' objections, including President H.W. Bush. Their reason was it could inhibit the ability of the United States to use its military to meet alliance obligations and participate in multinational operations. The first of the Nuremberg trials were concluded on October 1st, 1946. Hermann Goering, Reichsmarshal, charged with conspiracy, crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by hanging. Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer. Verdict, guilty on 2 counts. Sentence, life imprisonment. Joachim von Ribbentrop, Reich Minister for Foreign Affairs. Verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentence, death by hanging. The conclusion of the trial of 22 top Nazis accused of war crimes resulted in the following. 12 were sentenced to death, 3 were acquitted, 7 received prison sentences ranging from 10 years to life. October 16, 1946, the sentences of death were carried out. Julius Streicher, von Ribbentrop, Wilhelm Keitel, Ernst Kaltenbrenner, all except Hermann Goering, who cheated the hangman by taking his own life. The first of the Nuremberg trials were over. Still to come were 12 more trials of 177 diplomats, generals, SS officers, high Nazi officials, doctors, judges, directors of IG Farben, leading German business and professional men whose cooperation was essential to the success of the Nazi conspiracy.
Judge Haywood?
Yes.
Colonel Parker.
How do you do?
This is General Marin.
Welcome.
And you know Captain Byers.
Yes.
Ever been to Germany before?
Just once, World War I.
How are your quarters? Comfortable?
I think the state of South Carolina would be comfortable in them.
What do you mean?
They've given me this enormous house. I get lost trying to find my way to the kitchen. And 3 servants.
When the government does something, it does it right. You know that.
I don't need all this. And the 3 servants make me feel like a damn fool.
We do it for them, too. If they work for you, they eat.
Well, I guess I need 3 servants then, Captain Byers.
We're lucky to have you.
I'm sure you are.
I beg your pardon.
Listen, Colonel, I wasn't the first choice for this job, or even the 10th. I know it, you know it.
What do you mean?
The war's been over for 2 years. The big ones, Goering, Hess, and Speer, have been tried. You're down to trying the businessmen, doctors, and what I'm sitting in on, the judges. A lot of people think they shouldn't be tried at all.
So?
So there's a hell of a lack of candidates for this job. You even had to beat the backwoods of North Carolina to come up with a hick like me.
I hope you're not sorry you came.
No, I'm not sorry. I want you to know that I know a hawk from a handsaw. The only thing I feel I don't know anything about is international law.
Who does? Except a few professors at Columbia and I'm not sure they know.
Well, I hope I'm up to it.
Of course you are. Relax, enjoy things while you can. I'm sure you'll get used to living in a big house and having 3 servants. Captain Byers showed Judge Haywood around Nuremberg. It's a fascinating place, goes back to 1219. Enjoy the lakes and the greenery. They have no politics.
I would like to see something of the town, something of the people.
Nuremberg is yours, sir. What there is left of it.
Well, Tad, what do you think?
He's right. He's not up to it.
This is the main street. It's called Carolina Strasse, sir.
You're career Army, aren't you, Captain?
Yes, sir.
What's your first name?
Harrison. Harry.
Well, Harry, you see, I'm not Army, and this formality makes me a little uncomfortable. You think it'd be too much of an infraction of the rules for you to call me Judge or Dan or something?
Yes, sir. Judge.
How long have you been here, Harry?
2 years.
2 years. It's a long time.
Yes, sir. Judge.
You have any friends here?
Sure.
German friends?
They're too friendly to be friends.
A girl?
Yeah. Her parents were Nazis, but she was 8 years old when they came to power.
I didn't ask that.
I know, but maybe you were thinking it. It's natural to think about it. I thought if anybody was going to indoctrinate her, it might as well be me.
You don't care much for this assignment, do you?
Not much.
Don't you think the trials are important?
My feelings are the same as Churchill's. We should have held a military trial and shot them.
If they were found guilty.
After they were found guilty, then we can start getting ready for the next war.
And what war might that be?
The war with the Russians, of course.
I see.
Well, you're in the heart of what used to be Nuremberg's business section. You know, Nuremberg was a great toy center.
Really?
It was also the anti-Semitism center. This is where the first authorized violence against the Jews happened.
Authorized?
Hitler and his government tried an experiment. They decided on a 24-hour boycott of Jewish stores. They wanted to see whether the average German would protest or if they would be taken to task by the newspapers and the radio programs. It was a great success, better than they ever dreamed. The SS painted the shop windows and made the Jewish proprietors come out and clean the sidewalks with a toothbrush, no less.
Hard to believe it really happened, isn't it?
Not for me. I grew up in Texas. I've known these people. They speak another language and dress differently, but I've known them before. They're just like people in my hometown, people in my own unit.
You're trying to say that what happened here could happen at home?
Can I imagine that the people there would have done things like this if there wasn't a government to stop them and they might be punished? I guess a day doesn't pass when I don't wonder about that. Sorry if I've upset you, but people with my shade of skin react differently to what happened here than people with your shade of skin.
I understand.
Come on, I'll take you to Zeppelin Field where they held the rallies. The tribunal is now in session. Presiding the Honorable Justices Daniel Haywood, Curtis Ives, and Kenneth Norris. God save the United States of America and this honorable tribunal.
The tribunal will arraign the defendants. The microphone will now be placed in front of the defendant, Emil Hahn. Emil Hahn, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal?
Not guilty.
The question is, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal?
I am represented.
How do you plead to the charges and specifications set forth in the indictment against you? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. On all counts.
You may be seated. Frederick Hofstetter, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal?
Yes, Your Honor. I am represented by counsel.
How do you plead to the charges and specifications set forth in the indictment against you? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
You may be seated. Werner Lampe, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal?
Counsel? Yes.
How do you plead to the charges and specifications set forth in the indictment against you? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
You may be seated. Ernst Janning, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal? Ernst Janning, are you represented by counsel before this tribunal?
Your Honor, I am Oscar Rolf. I represent the defendant.
Ernst Janning, how do you plead to the charges and specifications set forth in the indictment against you? Guilty or not guilty?
May I address the court?
Yes.
The defendant does not recognize the authority of this tribunal and wishes to lodge a formal protest in lieu of pleading.
A plea of not guilty will be entered. Prosecution will make its opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the case is unusual in that the defendants are charged with crimes committed in the name of the law. These men, together with their deceased or fugitive colleagues, are the embodiment of what passed for justice in the Third Reich. As judges on the bench, you will be sitting in judgment of judges in the dock. This is as it should be, for only a judge knows how much more a court is than a courtroom. It is a process and a spirit. It is the house of law. The defendants knew this, too. They knew courtrooms well. They sat in their black robes, and they distorted, and they perverted, and they destroyed justice and law in Germany. They are, perhaps more than others, guilty of complicity in murders, tortures, atrocities, the most cruel and devastating this world has ever seen. Their minds were not warped at an early age. They had attained maturity long before Hitler's rise to power. They embraced the ideologies of the Third Reich as educated adults. They, most of all, should have valued justice. Here, they will receive the justice they denied others. They will be judged according to the evidence presented in this courtroom. The prosecution asks nothing more.
Herr Rolf will make the opening statement for the defense.
May it please the tribunal. It is not only a great honor, but also a great challenge for an advocate to aid this tribunal in its task. The avowed purpose of this tribunal is to find a code of justice the whole world will be responsible to. How will this code be established? It will be established in a clear, honest evaluation of the responsibility for the crimes in the indictment stated by the prosecution. In the words of the great American jurist Oliver Wendell Holmes, this responsibility will not be found only in documents. It will be found in considerations of a political or social nature. It will be found, most of all, in the character of men. What is the character of Ernst Janning? Let us examine his life for a moment. Following World War I, he became one of the leaders of the Weimar Republic and was one of the framers of its democratic constitution. He became Minister of Justice in Germany in 1935, a position the equivalent of the Attorney General of the United States. Finally, in a Reichstag speech of 26 April 1942, Hitler attacked Janning and forced him to resign. If Ernst Janning is to be found guilty, certain implications must arise. A judge does not make the law. He carries out the laws of his country, be it a democracy or a dictatorship. The statement, "My country, right or wrong," was expressed by a great American patriot. It is no less true for a German patriot. Should Ernst Janning have carried out the laws of his country? Or should he have refused to carry them out and become a traitor? The defense is dedicated to finding responsibility, as is the prosecution, for it is not only Ernst Janning who is on trial here, it is the German people.
Shakes you up a bit, doesn't it, Curtis? These men were judges just like we are. Now they're sitting as defendants accused of crime.
We'll see if they're criminals or not.
What do you mean?
When you've been here a while, you'll see it's not so cut and dried.
Han looks at us as though we're the criminals.
Lampa doesn't seem to know what's going on.
Janning does. He refuses to acknowledge the authority of this court, and a lot of people think he's right.
I got a hold of some of the books of Ernst Janning.
Are they translated into English?
Into a lot of languages, Ken. His textbooks are still used in universities all over the world. I had no idea how important he was until I got a hold of this.
The Profession of Law by Ernst Jannings. Is it interesting?
Well, they're more than that. They're really a picture of an era in Germany. Its hopes, its aspirations. They weren't so different from ours, really.
A lot of people are upset about him being a part of all this.
Now listen to this. On the signing of the Weimar Constitution, he wrote, "Now we can look forward to a Germany without guns and bloodshed. A Germany of justice, where men can live instead of die. A Germany of purpose, of freedom, of humanity. A Germany that calls for the best in men." How could a man who wrote words like these be a part of sterilizations and murders? How could he be?
Parker says he was.
I know. But the prosecution is going to have to prove every inch of its allegations against Jannings. And to tell you the truth, I'm very uneasy sitting in judgment on a man of his stature.
Well, that's why we're here. We'll be talking about this until the end of the trial. Now, what are you fellows up to this weekend? My wife is planning a little get-together at the Grand Hotel Saturday night.
My wife and I are going to Liège.
There's nothing in Liège. I've been there.
My son was in the 101st. He's buried in the American cemetery outside Liège.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
You'll come, won't you, Dan?
Sure.
My wife was thinking she might bring someone along, perhaps one of the women who work here at the tribunal. She was concerned you might be lonely. We know you lost your wife recently.
I don't think I'm up to it right now, Curtis. Maybe sometime later.
Well, just let us know. I've got to get back. We have a dinner date. You coming along, Ken?
Yep. What about you, Dan?
I think I'll stay here a little while.
Are they treating you all right?
Yes, they are treating me all right.
We still have some friends who have contact with the American authorities. I can tell them if they're not treating you all right.
They're treating me all right.
Herr Jannings, we are both in an embarrassing position. I know you didn't want me as your counsel. I know you didn't want anyone. I want to tell you something. Will you listen to me? I intend to represent your case with complete dignity. There will be no appeal to sentiment. There will be no placing yourself at the mercy of the court. The game will be played according to their own rules. We will see if they have the courage to sit in judgment on a man like you. Herr Jannings, I have followed your career since I was a boy studying at the university. It was because I thought I might be able to achieve some of the things that you did that saw me through the war.
How old are you?
32.
32. Are you finished?
Yes.
I must go.
Would you state your name to the tribunal, please?
Karl Weikert.
Did you know the defendant Ernst Jannings?
Yes, I know Ernst Jannings.
Will you tell us in what capacity?
We served in the Ministry of Justice together until 1935.
Did you know him before that?
Yes. He was a law student of mine.
Did you know him well?
Yes.
Was he a protege of yours?
Yes.
Dr. Weikert, will you tell us, from your own experience, the position of the judge in Germany prior to the advent of Adolf Hitler?
The position of the judge was one of complete independence.
And did this system change after the Nazis came to power?
Judges became subject to something outside of objective justice. They became subject to what was necessary for the protection of the country.
Would you explain this, please?
The first consideration of the judge became the punishment of acts against the state, rather than the protection of the accused.
What other changes were there?
The right to appeal was eliminated. The Supreme Court of the Reich was abolished. The concept of race was made a legal concept for the first time.
What was the result of this change?
The result was to hand over the entire judicial system of the country into the hands of the dictator.
Dr. Weikert, I would like to ask you a question. Did the judges protest these laws abridging that independence?
A few of them did. Those who did resigned or were forced to resign. Others adapted themselves to the new situation.
Do you think that the judiciary was aware of the consequences to come?
At first, perhaps not. Then it became clear to anyone who had eyes and ears.
Thank you.
Dr. Weikert, would you discuss for us the changes in criminal law that took place under the Third Reich?
Special courts were established. These courts impose the death penalty or heavy sentences whether the accused was guilty or not, only because they were Jews or Poles or politically unreliable. Also, novel National Socialist measures were introduced. Among them, sexual sterilization of those characterized as asocial. All these things were done under the authority of Ernst Janning as Minister of Justice.
Dr. Weikert, did it become necessary for judges to wear any distinctive mark on their robes in 1935?
Yes. The so-called Führer's decree required judges to wear the insignia of the swastika on their robes.
Did you wear such an insignia?
No. I would have been ashamed to wear it.
Did you resign in 1935?
Yes.
Did Ernst Janning wear a swastika on his robe?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Weikert. That's all.
Defense counsel may cross-examine.
Dr. Weikert, you used the phrase, what was necessary for the protection of the country. Would you explain for the tribunal the conditions in Germany at the time National Socialism came to power?
What conditions?
Would you say there was widespread hunger?
In 1933? Yes.
Would you say there was internal disunity?
Yes.
Would you say that National Socialism helped to cure some of these conditions?
Yes, but at a terrible price.
Dr. Weikert, please confine yourself to answering the questions only. Therefore, was it not possible that a judge might wear a swastika and yet work for what he thought was best for his country?
No, it was not possible.
Was there a communist party?
Yes.
Was it the third largest party in Germany?
Yes, it was.
Did they set fire to the Reichstag, one of Germany's most sacred buildings?
That is one interpretation. My interpretation is that the Nazis set fire to it themselves to give the appearance of a national crisis, so that they could take the system of justice away from the independent courts and put it in the hands of the dear Führer.
Dr. Weikert, you were not in the administration from the years 1935 to 1943. By your own admission, is it not possible that your view of the administration might be distorted?
No, it is not.
How can you testify to what was going on in the administration if you were not there?
I had friends in the legal administration. There were books, journals.
From books and journals. I see. Dr. Weikert, you refer to novel National Socialist measures introduced, among them sterilization. Are you aware sterilization was not invented by National Socialism, but had been advanced for years before as a weapon in dealing with mentally incompetent and a criminal?
Yes, I am aware of that.
Are you aware that it has advocates among leading citizens in many other countries?
I'm not an expert on sterilization
Then
laws.
permit me to read one to you. This is a High Court opinion upholding a sterilization law in existence in another country. And I quote, "We have seen more than once that the public welfare may call upon the best citizens for their lives. It would be strange indeed if it could not call upon those who already sapped the strength of the state in order to prevent our being swamped by incompetence. It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute the general offspring for crime or to let them starve through their imbecility, society can, through sterilization, prevent those who are manifestly unfit for continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." End quote. Do you recognize it now, Dr. Weikert?
No, sir, I do not.
Actually, there is no particular reason you should, since the opinion upholds the sterilization law in the state of Virginia of the United States, and was written and delivered by that great American jurist, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Now, Dr. Weikert, in view of what you have just learned, can you still say sexual sterilization was a novel National Socialist measure?
Yes, I can say it. Because never before has it been used as a weapon against political enemies.
Do you know personally of a case in which someone was sterilized for political reasons?
I know such things were done.
Please answer the question. Do you know of a case?
I do not know a specific name or of a specific date.
That's not the question. I am asking if you have any first-hand personal knowledge of a case.
No, sir. I have no such personal knowledge.
Dr. Weikert, are you aware of the charges in the indictment against Ernst Janning?
Yes.
Can you honestly say he is responsible for them?
Yes, I can.
Dr. Weikert, do you consider yourself free of responsibility?
Yes, I do.
Dr. Weikert, did you ever swear to the civil servant loyalty oath in 1934?
Your Honor, I object. The witness does not have to answer that question. He is not on trial.
All Germany is on trial, Your Honors. This tribunal placed it on trial when it placed Ernst Jönning on trial. If responsibility is to be found, the widest latitude is to be permitted.
Objection overruled.
Did you ever swear to the civil servant loyalty oath of 1934?
Everyone did.
We are not interested in what everyone did. We want to know what you did. I will read you the oath from the Reich Law Gazette, March 1933. I swear that I shall be obedient to the leader of the German Reich and people, Adolf Hitler, that I shall be loyal to him, that I will observe the laws, and that I will conscientiously fulfill my duties, so help me God.
Everyone swore to it. It was mandatory.
Yes, but you're a perceptive man, Dr. Weikert. You could see what was coming. You could see that National Socialism was leading Germany to disaster. It was clear to anyone who had eyes and ears. Didn't you realize what it would have meant if you and men like you had refused to swear the oath? It would have meant that Hitler would never have come to absolute power. Why didn't you, Doctor? Can you give us an explanation? Did it have something to do with your pension? Did your pension mean more to you than your country?
Your Honor.
No further questions.
Your Honor, I object to the entire line of questioning and ask that it be stricken from the record.
I thought prosecuting counsel was dedicated to finding responsibility.
Your Honor, I've made an objection.
Prosecution is not interested in finding responsibility?
There is responsibility for more here than swearing to a loyalty oath, and you know it.
There is indeed. There's responsibility for heinous crimes. Crimes that have been charged against some of the most eminent men.
They are all eminent men. Every man who's been in the dock has been an eminent man.
Prosecution has stated it would prove responsibility by evidence.
Defense counsel may be speaking that way because he knows no one who was in the administration will step forward and speak the truth.
Your Honor!
There is one thing that even the German machine with its monumental efficiency has been unable to destroy.
Order!
All the victims. More victims than the world has ever known. They will walk into this courtroom.
Tribunal will now admonish both counsel. It will tolerate nothing like this again. We're not here to listen to outbursts of this kind, but to serve justice. It will not be served by emotions of this kind.
Your Honor, I made an objection.
Objection overruled. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. Dr. Weikert, you are excused. You may go. Mrs. Halberstadt, I wonder if I could... Oh, hello.
Hello? Your Honor, this is Mrs. Berthold. This is His Honor, Judge Haywood. Mrs. Berthold, this was her house. She came to get some of her belongings from the basement. I didn't know she was coming tonight.
It's my responsibility, Mrs. Halberstadt. Your Honor, I have just been storing some things in the basement until I could get a room big enough to keep them. I hope you don't mind.
No, not at all.
You can check what I have here, if you like.
No, of course not.
Thank you. I'll just take these out. Thank you, Mrs. Halberstadt.
Let me help you with that.
It's perfectly all right. I can manage. It's full of books and pictures and I don't know what. Things that mean nothing to anyone except to me.
Tell the driver to take her home.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll take it, Mrs. Berthold.
Thank you. I hope you are comfortable here.
Yes, I am. Very.
My favorite spot was always the garden. Remind Mrs. Halberstadt to take good care of it. You'll get a great deal of pleasure out of it in the summer. Good night.
Good night. Mrs. Halberstadt, you worked for Mrs. Berthold, didn't you?
Yes, Your Honor.
How long did she live here?
Mrs. Berthold and her family have lived here for generations, Your Honor.
Thanks.
Your Honor, you came in here for something.
Oh, yes, I was going to make myself a sandwich.
I'll make it for you, Your Honor. I'll make anything you want.
No, it's nothing. I always did it for myself back home.
What would you like? We have some ham? And some tongue, and some liver sausage.
Well, I'll try that liver sausage. Oh. That's very kind of you. What was it like to live under National Socialism?
What was it like?
What was it like day to day? You're just like people back home. You're good people. I know that. What was it like for you to live under Hitler?
Oh, we were not political. I am not political.
I know, but you must have been aware of some of the events that were going on. A lot of things were going on. There were parades going on. Hitler and Goebbels used to come here every year. What was it like?
We never attended meetings, never.
I'm not putting you on trial, Mrs. Halberstadt. I'd just like to know.
Here you are, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
For instance, there's a place just 80 miles from here called Dachau.
We knew nothing about it. Nothing about it. How can you ask if we knew anything about it?
I'm sorry.
Is the sandwich all right, Your Honor?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Your Honor, we are just little people. I lost a son in the war. I lost a daughter in the bombing. We went hungry during the war. It was terrible for us.
I'm sure it was.
Hitler did some good things. I won't say he didn't do some good things. He gave more people work. No, I won't say he didn't do some good things. But the bad things, the things they say he did to the Jews and the rest, we didn't know about such things. Very few Germans knew. And if we did know, what could we do?
But Mrs. Halberstadt, you said you didn't know. Mrs. Berthold, what was Mrs. Berthold's reaction to all of this?
Mrs. Berthold is a very fine woman, Your Honor.
What about her husband?
He was in the army.
Oh, what happened to him?
He was a defendant in the Malmedy case, Your Honor.
General Berthold? Karl Berthold?
He was executed, Your Honor.
Yes, I know that.
The seamstress Annie Munch, daughter of Wilhelm Munch, is to be sterilized. It is therefore requested...
Your Honor, defense objects to introduction of these documents. According to the ruling of the first tribunal, such documents are not admissible unless supported by independent evidence of their authenticity.
Objection sustained.
Your Honor, may I ask the defense a question? Would evidence on sterilization be acceptable if there were a witness?
Yes, it would.
Prosecution calls the witness, Rudolf Peterson.
Will you raise your right hand and repeat after me the following oath? I swear by God, the Almighty and Omniscient, that I will speak the pure truth and will withhold and add nothing.
I swear by God, the Almighty and Omniscient, that I will speak the pure truth and will withhold and add nothing.
Will you please tell the court your full name and place of residence?
Rudolf Peterson. Rudolf Peterson, Frankfurt am Main.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a baker's helper.
Are your parents living?
No, they are not.
What were the causes of their deaths? Were they natural causes?
Yes, natural causes.
Mr. Peterson, to what political party did your parents belong in 1933?
The Communist Party.
And how old were you at the time?
About 17.
Now, Mr. Peterson, do you remember anything unusual that happened in 1933 before the Nazis came to power?
Yes. Yes, sir. Some SA men broke into our house. They smashed all the doors and the windows and called us all traitors and beat up my father. My brothers and I drove the men out of our house and turned them over to the police.
Did the police do anything about the matter?
No.
Why not?
They had elections at that time. The National Socialists had come to power.
And now, would you tell the tribunal what happened after 1933, when the Nazis had come to power?
I got a job on a farm, but for the work it was necessary to drive a truck. I went to the town hall to apply for a license.
And what happened?
They took me to an official. He was one of the men who broke into our house. He told me that an examination would be necessary.
Where was the examination to take place?
The District Court of Stuttgart.
And who was the presiding judge in this court?
Justice Friedrich Hofstetter.
What happened in the courtroom?
They asked me when Adolf Hitler and Dr. Goebbels were born.
And what did you reply?
I told them I didn't know and I didn't care either.
Mr. Peterson, do you recognize this piece of paper?
Yes, sir, yes, I do.
Would you read it to the tribunal?
District Court of Stuttgart. You are requested to present yourself within 2 weeks at one of the hospitals mentioned before to be sterilized. If you do not betake yourself voluntarily, you will be taken by force.
Now, Mr. Peterson, would you read what is written below Justice Hofstadter's signature?
Yes. By the authority of Ernst Janning, Ministry of Justice.
Mr. Peterson, what did you do after you received this letter?
I ran away, but the police got me and took me to a hospital.
And what happened at the hospital?
They kept me there by force. The nurse came in who was supposed to prepare me for the operation, and she told me that the whole thing was terrible. Then the doctor came in who was supposed to operate on me and told me that the whole thing was a shame, a disgrace.
And were you, in fact, sterilized?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Defense counsel will cross-examine.
Mr. Peterson, you worked as a baker's helper.
Yes.
What other occupations have you held?
I have worked for my father.
What did your father do?
He was a railroad worker.
What did he do?
He carried signal cards on the railroads.
Mr. Peterson, you spoke about your brothers. How many brothers do you have?
5.
How many sisters?
4.
4. Then you are a family of 10.
Yes, 10.
What occupation do your brothers have?
They are all laborers.
Laborers?
Yes.
I see. How long did you attend school, Mr. Peterson?
6 years.
6 years? Why not longer?
I didn't want to attend longer. I wanted to go to work.
Would you consider yourself a very bright fellow at school?
I don't remember what happened at school.
Your Honor, I offer as evidence the petition that came from the court in Stuttgart. I would like to read to you the efficiency report made at the school about Mr. Peterson. He failed to be promoted and was placed in a class of backward children.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness's school record has nothing to do with his sterilization.
It was the task of the health court to order sterilization of the mentally incompetent.
Objection overruled.
Did your parents die of natural causes?
Yes.
Would you describe the illness your mother died of?
She died of heart disease.
During the last stages of her illness, did your mother show any mental peculiarities?
No.
In a decision that came from the court in Stuttgart, it is stated that your mother suffered from hereditary feeble-mindedness.
That's a lie.
Could you give us some clarification as to how the hereditary health court in Stuttgart arrived at that decision?
It was just something they said to get me on the operating table.
It was just something they said?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson, you said the court in Stuttgart asked you 2 questions. The birth date of Hitler and Dr. Goebbels.
Yes.
What else did they ask you?
Nothing else.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure.
Mr. Peterson, there was a simple test that the court used to ask in all cases of possible mental incompetence. Since you say they did not ask you then, perhaps you can answer it now. Form a sentence out of the words Herr, Hunter, and Field.
Objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Peterson, was the court at Stuttgart constituted like this? Was there an audience?
Yes, there was an audience.
Objection overruled.
Herr, Hunter, and Field, Mr. Peterson. Take your time.
Herr Hunter and Field. Herr Hunter Field. They all made up their minds before I entered the courtroom. They all made up their minds. They took me to that hospital and they kept me there just like a criminal, and I couldn't say anything. I just had to lay there. And my mother was a very hard-working, very good woman all her life. It's not fair to say things about her. I have a picture. Your Honor, I would like to show it to you. I would like you to look at it. I would like you to judge whether my mother was feeble-minded or not. I want you to tell me if she was feeble-minded, my mother. Was she feeble-minded? Was she?
It is my duty to point out to the tribunal that the witness is not in control of his mental processes.
I am not. I know I am not. Since that day, I am half of what I've ever been, but I wasn't this way before.
The tribunal does not know the way you were before. It can never know. It only has your word.
They have the greatest strudel here I've ever tasted.
It's good, but I'm getting a little bit tired of it. A little bit with this music, too. Don't they ever change their repertoire? Must have heard this tune 1,000 times.
Just a minute. Mrs. Berthold, won't you come over? This is Mrs. Berthold, Judge Haywood.
We've met. Hello.
Hello again.
Won't you join us for a drink?
Oh, thank you.
Please do.
Another round for the table?
What would you like?
What are you having?
Well, I've had my fill of beer, so...
Why don't you try a local wine? Sonnenberg or Schwalbenwinkel? Schwalbenwinkel.
I'll have some of that.
I'll have the same, thank you.
Danke sehr.
I hope you got home all right that night.
Yes, I did, thank you. I don't know how I would have managed without the car.
You speak English very well.
Oh, my husband and I spent some years in America.
Really?
I hope you've been able to see some of Nuremberg.
Well, mainly the road from my house to... from your house to the Palace of Justice. And the parts that deal with the case, of course. The historical aspects.
The Nazi aspects. You should see some of the other parts. It's been here a long time, long before Hitler.
I was in the old section once. We've been so busy. What would you suggest?
There's the Market Square. Oh, and there are many beautiful things in the old part of Nuremberg. There are even museums we are trying to rebuild.
Oh.
If you like classical music, there is a piano concert next week at the old opera house. Arthur Reis. He was a refugee from Hitler in the early days. The committee persuaded him to come back. It ought to be quite an evening. Would you like to come?
Yes, I would.
I'll tell them to leave a ticket at the box office for you. I'm on the committee.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Berthold.
Oh, it's nothing. You see, I have a mission with Americans.
What's that?
To convince you that we are not all monsters.
Good evening, Colonel Parker.
Good evening, Mrs. Berthold.
I hope you'll excuse me.
But you've just come, Mrs. Berthold.
I must go. Please excuse me. Good night.
Good night.
Mrs. Berthold doesn't harbor a burning passion for me. I prosecuted her husband.
There are many people who think that a death sentence wouldn't be passed against General Berthold today.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are people who think that all the prisoners in Nuremberg should be free today. I've had one or two too many, as might be painfully obvious to you. The spectacle this afternoon with Mr. Peterson put me off my feed. Sorry.
The trouble with you, Colonel, is that you'd like to indict the whole country. Now, that might be emotionally satisfying for you, but it's not exactly practical, and hardly fair.
Hare, hunter, field. Let's be fair. The hare was shot by the hunter in the field. It's really quite simple.
We really shouldn't be discussing this, Colonel.
There are no Nazis in Germany. Didn't you know that, Judge? The Eskimos invaded Germany and took over. That's how all those terrible things happened. It wasn't the fault of the Germans. It was those damned Eskimos.
You know, that's one problem with the prosecution. It's filled with radicals like Parker.
Is that what Colonel Parker is? A radical?
He was a personal protege of FDR.
That makes him a radical?
As a matter of fact, I've been wondering how you stand, Dan.
Well, I'll clarify that for you, Curtis. I'm a rock-ribbed Southern Republican who thinks Roosevelt was a great man.
Oh, one of those.
You hear what's going on?
What?
The Russians have entered Czechoslovakia. President Mazarek committed suicide.
Good
and the country's under martial law. We're sending some units up to the border.
Well, this is it. The end of the Grand Alliance. I knew it was coming anyway.
Curtis, I wonder whether we should send our wives home.
It's not that bad yet, Ken, is it?
The Czech border's only 60 miles away.
Supposing they decide to come over the border.
They're not saying they're going to do that, are they?
What difference does it make what they say? Nobody thought they'd take over Czechoslovakia. I always thought this was the real danger anyway.
What the hell does that mean?
We should have kept out of the whole thing and let them destroy each other.
That's an interesting viewpoint, Curtis.
Where has it gotten us? We're in for a life and death struggle, and who is the key to who wins that struggle? Germany! Any high school student in geography can tell you that.
Now, wait a minute.
Excuse me, gentlemen. More strudel?
Did you hear the news?
What news?
Truman's speech.
I'm not very interested in what Mr. Truman has to say.
Oh, you'll be interested in this. It's in the newspaper. Listen. President Truman stated that since the Czechoslovakian crisis, he has become deeply concerned with the survival of the Western nations in the face of the threat from the East. Threat from the East. Survival of the Western nations. Just as Hitler said. The clash for survival between East and West, he knew. He knew. Ernst, you were the head of the judiciary. You have followers not only in Germany, but all over the world. If you get up and speak, the world will listen. You must get up and speak, do you understand me?
We have fallen on good times, have we not, Herr Hahn? In the old times, it would have made your day if I had deigned to say good morning to you. Now we are in this place together, you feel obliged to order me what to do with my life.
We must stand together now. The most crucial part of the case is coming up now. They cannot call us criminals and at the same time ask us to help them. You must stand with us. It's not good for Germans to turn against one another. It will not be good for them to see that now. We must stand together now. We have common ground now.
What common ground do we have? What do I have in common with you and the rest of the party hacks like you? Listen to me, Herr Hahn. There were terrible things that happened to me in my life, but the worst thing that has ever happened is that I find myself in the company of men like you.
You have something in common? You were part of the same regime? You stood by that regime the same as the rest of us? There is something else you have in common. You are German!
Let me have your coat, Judge Haywood.
Thank you.
It's a little warmer here than in the Opera House. I'll put on the coffee. It will be ready in a minute. It's quite empty at the moment, but I've really just started. I'm going to have the dining room in the alcove. I'll get a small piano and put it over there. I have a beautiful painting by Feininger. Do you know Feininger's work?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's lovely. Germans are always talking about their possessions, aren't they? What's life like for you back home?
What's it like?
Oh, please, sit down. What kind of position do you hold? Is it very important?
No, not very important at all. I'm a district court judge, that's all. And for the last year or so, I haven't even been that.
You are retired.
Forcibly, by the electorate.
You elect judges in the United States?
Yes, we do. In some districts.
Didn't know that.
It's either one of the virtues of our judiciary system or one of the defects. I thought it was one of the virtues until I was defeated last year.
I'm sure it was the electorate's fault, not yours.
There seems to be a difference of opinion about that. I don't know. I was in a long time. I guess they just got tired of me, that's all. A new fellow came along. Well, what about you, Mrs. Berthold? You said you were in the United States. Where?
My husband and I took a ride by automobile all over the United States. We were really very impressed. It was a very happy time for us. The coffee must be ready. I'll get it.
What impressed you the most?
The people. They are so outgoing, so really uncomplicated. People in Germany think it's an act, but that's because they don't know Americans. They really are like that. Do you take milk and sugar?
Black. Life isn't easy for you now, is it?
I'm not used to life being easy. I'm a daughter of the military. You know what that means, don't you?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
It means that I was taught discipline in a very special way. For instance, when I was a child, we used to go for long hikes in the country, but I would never be allowed to run to the lemonade stands with the others. Control your thirst, I was told. Control hunger, control emotions. It has served me well.
Was your husband like that? Was he part of that heritage too?
He was a soldier, brought up to do one thing, to fight in the battle and fight well. Do you have a family, Judge Haywood?
Yes, I do. I have a daughter. She has 4 children.
There's Mrs. Haywood.
She died a few years ago. How about you? Do you have children?
No, I don't. I'm curious, what are your feelings about Ernst Janning?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Berthold. I can't discuss the case at all outside the court.
Yes, of course. It was just that I knew Ernst Janning a little. They used to attend the same concerts. I remember there was a reception given for Wagner's daughter-in-law. Hitler was there. Janning was there with his wife also. She was very beautiful, very small, very delicate. She is dead now. Hitler seemed quite taken with her. He made advances toward her at the reception.
Hitler?
He would do things like that in a burst of emotion. I will never forget the way Janning cut him down. I don't think anybody ever did it quite that way to him. He said, "Chancellor, I do not object so much that you are ill-mannered. I do not object to that so much. I do object that you are such a bourgeois."
What happened?
Hitler's face whitened. He just stared at Janning and then walked out. Would you like some more coffee?
No, I'm fine.
Men like Janning and my husband and I, we hated Hitler. I want you to know that. And he hated us. He hated my husband because he was a real war hero, and the little corporal couldn't tolerate that. Because he married into the nobility, which was my family. Hitler was in awe of the nobility, but he hated it. That's why it was so outrageous what happened. You know what happened to my husband?
Yes.
What did he know about the crimes they cited him for? He was placed on trial with the Nazi political leaders, and he was made to seem one of them. He became part of the revenge the victors always take on the vanquished. It was political murder. You know that, don't you?
I don't know what I believe, Mrs. Berthold.
No, you don't know what to believe. No, all of us don't know what to believe. We're each told lies about each other. If you go to either side, you'll hear about atrocities of the other. I wish the day will come when there will be no more lies. I have the case on my husband here. Would you like to read it?
No, Mrs. Berthold.
You don't want to read it?
Mrs. Berthold, I shouldn't even be listening to this. I shouldn't even be here. I should get everything I need out of the courtroom. But I don't. So I look for the answers in the streets, in the opera house, in the cafes, on the streetcars. They all seem like human beings, like any human beings. But inhuman things happened here. What the hell happened in this country?
Dr. Gerter, do you recognize this headline?
Yes, sir.
Will you read it to the tribunal?
Death to the race defiler.
In what newspaper did this appear?
Julius Streicher's Der Stürmer, in connection with the Feldenstein case.
And what was the Feldenstein case?
It's the case of a man here in Nuremberg charged with racial pollution.
Will you explain to the tribunal what is meant by racial pollution?
It is referred to in the Nuremberg laws. It says that any non-Aryan having sexual relations with an Aryan may be punished by death.
Dr. Gerter, when did you first become acquainted with the Feldenstein case?
The police contacted me in September 1935. They said that Lehman Feldenstein was being held and that he had asked me to represent him as counsel.
Had you known him before?
Yes, very well.
What position did he hold in the community?
He was a well-known merchant and one of the heads of the Jewish congregation of Nuremberg.
And what was the nature of the charge against him?
He was accused of having intimate relations with a 16-year-old girl, Maria Wollner.
Did you go to see Mr. Feldenstein?
Yes.
What did Mr. Feldenstein say to you about the case?
He said it was false. He said he had known the girl and her family a long time and had visited her since they died, but there had never been anything of that kind between them.
Will you tell the tribunal what happened then?
Mr. Feldenstein was indicted before the special court at Nuremberg.
Where was the special court?
It was here, in this building, in this very courtroom.
What were the circumstances surrounding the trial?
It was used as a showcase for National Socialism. It was the time of the September celebrations, the Nuremberg rallies. The courtroom was packed. There were people standing back there. Julius Streicher was sitting in one of those front seats with the members of the SA all around him.
What were your expectations for the trial in this climate?
I expected the worst when I saw Emil Hahn was public prosecutor. He was a fanatic. His trials were always marked by his brutality. But I still had some hope for the outcome because sitting in the judge's bench was Ernst Janning.
Thank you, Dr. Gerder. That's all.
Defense counsel may cross-examine.
Thank you. No questions.
The witness is excused.
The prosecution calls to the stand Miss Maria Vollner. Will you please state your name to the tribunal?
Maria Vollner?
Miss Vollner, did you know Lehman Feldenstein?
Yes.
When did you first know him?
Since I was 5 or 6 years old. I'm not sure exactly.
How old was he at this time?
He must have been in his 50s.
How old was he at the time of his arrest?
He was 65.
What was the nature of your relationship?
We were friends.
Did you continue to see him after your parents died?
Yes.
Why?
We were friends. He owned the building I lived in. His business took him there quite often.
What did you say to the police when they questioned you about having intimate relations with him?
I told them it was a lie.
Could you tell me who the public prosecutor was?
It was Emil Hahn.
Did the public prosecutor question you?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He took me into a separate room where we were alone. He told me that there was no use repeating my story because no one would believe me. There had been race defilement, and the only pardon for this was in killing the violator. He said if I protected Mr. Feldenstein, I would be held under arrest for perjury.
What did you reply to him?
I told him what I had said again and again. I told him I could not say anything else. I could not lie about someone who had been so kind to me.
Were you held under arrest?
Yes.
What was the manner in which Emil Hahn conducted the prosecution?
He mocked everything Mr. Feldenstein tried to say in his defense. He used every opportunity to hold him up to ridicule.
What was the reaction of the audience?
They laughed again and again.
How long did the trial last?
2 days.
Was the verdict passed at the end of the second day?
Yes.
What was the verdict?
Guilty.
What was the sentence?
Mr. Feldenstein was sentenced to be executed. I was sentenced to be imprisoned for 2 years for perjury.
Who was the presiding judge?
Ernst Janning.
Were the sentences carried out?
Yes.
Miss Vollner, it was not easy for you to come here and testify today, was it?
People do not think Germans should testify against other Germans.
But you have come. Why?
I came for Lehman Feldenstein.
That's all.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor, I would like to request that the witness be kept available. We will present further evidence on the Feldenstein case when it comes time for the defense to present its case.
The witness will remain available. Prosecution will continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution will conclude its case with the evidence which I am about to offer. The defendants on trial here today did not personally administer the concentration camps. They never had to beat victims or pull the levers in the gas chambers. But as the documents and testimony we have introduced have shown, these defendants issued the orders and rendered judgments which sent millions of victims to their terrible destinations. Your Honors, there are no words to fully describe what happened, but we have a mute but eloquent witness, the camera's eye. I now respectfully request the tribunal to view what the camera saw. The map shows the number and location of concentration camps under the Third Reich. Buchenwald concentration camp was founded in 1933. The inmates at the camp numbered about 80,000. There was a motto at Buchenwald: break the body, break the spirit, break the heart. The ovens at Buchenwald. The evidence of last-minute efforts to dispose of bodies. An exhibit of the byproducts of Buchenwald was displayed for the local townspeople, a lampshade made of human skin being used for paintings, many of an obscene nature. The heads of 2 Polish laborers, shrunken to 1/5 their normal size, a human pelvis used as an ashtray, is displayed. Children who have been tattooed to mark them for eventual extermination. Hundreds of inmates were used as human guinea pigs for atrocious medical experiments. A witness of one of the executions of Dachau gave the following description. Inmates were made to leave their clothing on a rack. The inmates were made to believe they were going to take showers. The doors were locked. Gases called Zyklon B were released through the specially constructed apertures. This is what was found when British troops liberated the Belsen concentration camp. For sanitary reasons, the bulldozer is forced to bury the bodies as quickly as possible. Who were the bodies? 200,000 mentally and physically disabled. 220,000 gypsies. 3 million Soviet POWs. 2/3 of the Jews of Europe. Exterminated. More than 6 million, according to reports compiled from the Nazis' own figures. But the real figures? No one knows.
I brought down these guides and maps for you. We can decide what you should see next. Oh, you must see the Albrecht Dürer house and the museum. When do you think you could make it?
Oh, any weekend.
Excuse me, are you ready to order?
What would you like?
I don't think I'll have anything.
Just a glass of Moselle, please.
Very good.
What's the matter?
I'm just not very thirsty, that's all. You know, these last few days have meant a lot to me.
How?
Well, I don't think you realize what a provincial man I am. I've been abroad exactly once before. When I was a doughboy in World War I, I used to pass places like this and wonder what they were really like.
They've meant a lot to me, too.
How?
They've given back to me the feelings of the Americans I had. The feeling I had when I went to your country.
Your Moselle, Fräulein.
Oh. I saw someone who worked in the court today. He told me they showed those pictures in the courtroom. Colonel Parker and his pictures. He drags them out on any pretext, doesn't he? Colonel Parker's private chamber of horrors. Well, is that the way you think we are? Do you think we were aware of those things? Do you think we wanted to murder women and children? Do you believe that? Do you?
Margareta, I don't know what to believe.
Dan, my God, we're sitting here drinking. You don't know much about me, but we have experienced a few things together. How can you think that we knew?
As far as I can find out, no one in this country knew. Your husband was one of the heads of the army.
He didn't know. I tell you, he didn't know. It was Himmler. It was Goebbels. The SS knew what was happening. We didn't know. Listen to me. There are things that happened on both sides. My husband was a military man all his life. He was entitled to a soldier's death. He asked for that. I tried to get that for him, just that he should die with some honor. I went from official to official. I asked for that. I begged for that, just that he be permitted the dignity of a firing squad. You know what happened. He was hanged with the others. After that, I knew what it meant to hate. I never left the house. I never left my room. I drank. I hated with every fiber of my being. I hated every American I had ever known. Dan, one can't live with hate. I've learned that. Dan, we have to forget. We have to forget if we are to go on living.
Your Honor, yesterday the tribunal witnessed some films. They were shocking films, devastating films. As a German, I am ashamed that such things could take place in my country. There can never be a justification for them. Not in generations, not in centuries. But I do think it was terribly unfair to show these films, in this case, at this time, against these defendants. And I cannot protest too strongly against such tactics. What is the prosecution trying to prove? Is it trying to prove that the German people as a whole were responsible for these events? Or that we were even aware of them? The secrecy of the operation, The geographical location of the camps, the breakdown of communications in the last days of the war, when the exterminations rose into the millions, show only too clearly that he is not stating the truth. The truth is that these brutalities were brought about by the few extremists, the criminals. Very few Germans knew what was going on. We did not know. The most ironic part of it is that the prosecution showed these films against these defendants. Men who stayed in power for one reason only, to prevent worse things from happening. Who is the braver man? The man who escapes in times of peril, or the man who stays at his post at the risk of his own personal safety? The defense will present witnesses and letters and documents from religious and political refugees all over the world, telling how Ernst Janning saved them from execution. The defense will show the many times Ernst Janning was able to effect mitigation of sentences, when, without his influence, the result would have been much worse. We will present affidavits from legal authorities and famed jurists the world over. The prosecution has in fact presented only one piece of evidence against Ernst Janning. A notorious case, as the defense has stated, the Feldenstein case. A case which never should have been reopened. A case which the defense is obliged to review now. The defense calls Mrs. Elsa Littnau. Mrs. Littnau, what is your occupation?
I am a cleaning woman.
Where are you employed?
345 Großplatz.
Mrs. Littnau, did you know Lehmann Feldenstein?
Yes, I knew him.
In what capacity?
He was my employer in 1935.
Did you know the witness, Maria Wallner?
Yes.
In what capacity?
She was a tenant in the building.
Did you ever see Miss Wallner and Mr. Feldenstein together?
Yes.
How did this happen?
Mr. Feldenstein came to see Miss Wallner at her apartment.
Often?
Quite often.
Mrs. Littnau, were there any occasions in which you noticed anything unusual?
Yes. I saw Miss Wallner kissing Mr. Feldenstein at the door of her apartment.
Was there any other occasion in which you noticed anything unusual?
Yes, there was one.
What was it?
I came into Miss Wallner's apartment. I wanted to clean up. I thought it was empty. I saw Miss Wallner sitting on Mr. Feldenstein's lap.
Thank you. The defense calls Maria Wallner. Miss Wallner, did you come here voluntarily? Did you report voluntarily to speak as a witness?
Yes.
Is it not true that Colonel Parker asked you to come here? Is it not true that it was very disagreeable for you to come here?
It is always very disagreeable to live over that time.
That would be in agreement with the information I have that you yourself did not want to come. Miss Wallner, the Nuremberg laws were stated on September 15th, 1935. Where were you at that time?
In Nuremberg?
Were you aware that physical relationship with Jews was against the law?
Yes.
Do you know that in Nuremberg, and Nuremberg in particular, not only a physical relationship with Jews was viewed with disdain, but every social contact?
Yes.
Were you aware that it might have some danger for you personally?
Yes, I was aware of it. But how could a friendship be discarded from one day to the next because of...
That is another question. I did not ask that question, Miss Wallner. Were you aware of it?
Yes, I was aware.
And yet you still continue to see each other?
Yes.
Do you remember it was brought out at the trial that Mr. Feldenstein brought you things? Candy and cigarettes?
Yes.
Remember that he sometimes brought you flowers?
Yes. He bought me things, but it was because he was kind. He was the kindest man I ever knew.
Miss Wallner, do you know the witness, Mrs. Elsa Littnau?
Yes, I know her.
Was she a cleaning woman in the apartment you lived in?
Yes.
Did Mr. Feldenstein come to see you in your apartment?
Yes, he came to see me.
How many times?
I don't remember.
Several times?
Yes.
Many times?
Many times.
Did you kiss him?
Yes, I kissed him.
Was there more than one kiss?
Yes, but not in the way you are making it sound. He was like a father to me. He was more than my father.
Did you sit on his lap?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is persecuting the witness in the pretext of gaining testimony.
Objection overruled.
I cannot accept this ruling, Your Honor.
I'm afraid you'll have to accept it.
The defense is being permitted to reenact what was a travesty of justice in the first place.
Colonel Parker, the tribunal makes the rulings in this case, not the prosecution. You may continue.
Did you sit on his lap?
Yes, but there was nothing wrong or ugly about it.
Did you sit on his lap?
Yes.
You sat on his lap. What else did you do?
Your Honor.
What else do you admit to?
Stop it! Stop it!
What else?
Are you going to do this
What
again?
else?
Are you going to do this again?
Your Honor, the stress Herr Janning has been under is so great he is not aware of exactly...
I am aware. I am aware.
Your Honor, I believe the defendant wishes to make a statement.
Your Honor, I believe the defense has a right to
Order.
request...
Order! Does the defendant wish to make a statement?
Yes. I wish to make a statement.
Your Honor, I believe the defense has a right to request a recess so that I may speak with my client.
Your Honor, the defendant has the right to make his statement now.
Tribunal will recess until 10:30 tomorrow morning.
Herr Janning, what are you doing? What do you think you're trying to do? They've had going. Frank, Stryker, it's enough. Do you think I've enjoyed being defense during this trial? Do you? There were things I had to do in that courtroom that made me cringe. Why did I do them? Because I want to leave the German people something. I want to leave them a shred of dignity. I want to call a halt to these proceedings. If we allow them to discredit every German like you, we lose the right to rule ourselves forever. We have to look at the future. We can't look back. Do you want the Americans to stay here forever? Do you want it? I could show you pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thousands and thousands of burnt bodies, women and children. Is that their superior morality? Where do they take us? Do you think they know? Do you think they have any concept of our problems? What can I say to you? What can I say to you to make you see?
There is nothing you can say.
Herr Janning, do you wish to make a statement before the tribunal?
I do.
Proceed.
I wish to testify about the Feldenstein case because it was the most significant trial of the period. It is important not only for the tribunal but for the German people to understand it. But to understand it, one must understand the period in which it happened. There was a fever over the land. A fever of disgrace, of indignity, of hunger. We had a democracy, yes, but it was torn by elements within. There was, above all, fear. Fear of today, fear of tomorrow, fear of our neighbors, fear of ourselves. Only when you understand that can you understand what Hitler meant to us. Because he said to us, lift up your heads, be proud to be German. There are devils among us, communists, liberals, Jews, gypsies. Once the devils are destroyed, your miseries will be destroyed. It was the old story of the sacrificial lamb. What about us who knew better? We who knew the words were lies, and worse than lies. Why did we sit silent? Why did we participate? Because we loved our country. What difference does it make if a few political extremists lose their rights? What difference does it make if a few racial minorities lose their rights? It is only a passing phase. It is only a stage we are going through. It will be discarded sooner or later. The country is in danger. We will march out of the shadows. We will go forward. And history tells us how well we succeeded. We succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. The very elements of hate and power about Hitler that mesmerized Germany mesmerized the world. We found ourselves with sudden powerful allies. Things that had been denied us as a democracy were open to us now. The world said, go ahead, take it. Take Sudetenland, take the Rhineland, remilitarize it, take all of Austria, take it. We marched forward. The danger passed. And then one day, we looked around and found we were in even more terrible danger. The riots that began in the courtroom swept over our land like a raging, roaring disease. What was going to be a passing phase had become a way of life. Your Honor, I was content to sit silent during this trial. I was even content to let counsel try to save my name. You have seen him do it. He has done it in this courtroom. He has suggested that the Third Reich worked for the benefit of the people. He has suggested that we sterilized men for the welfare of the country. He has suggested that perhaps the old Jew did sleep with the 16-year-old girl after all. Once more, it is being done for love of country. It is not easy to tell the truth. But if there is to be any salvation for Germany, those of us who know our guilt must admit it, no matter the cost in pain and humiliation. I had reached my verdict in the Felsenstein case before I ever came into the courtroom. I would have found him guilty whatever the evidence. It was not a trial at all. It was a sacrificial ritual in which Felsenstein the Jew was the helpless victim.
Your Honor, I must interrupt. The defendant is not aware of what he is saying. He's not aware.
I am aware. My defense counsel would even have you believe that we were not aware of the concentration camps. Not aware? Where were we? Where were we when Hitler began shrieking his hate in the Reichstag? Where were we when our neighbors were being dragged out of their houses in the middle of the night to Dachau? Where were we when every village in Germany had a railroad terminal where cattle cars were filled with children who were being carried off to their extermination? Where were we when they cried out in the night to us? Were we deaf, dumb, and blind?
Your Honor, I must...
Oh, maybe we didn't know the details. But if we didn't know, it was because we didn't want to know.
Traitor! Traitor!
Order! Order! There will be order! Put Herr Hahn in his seat and keep him there!
I am going to tell them the truth. I am going to tell the truth if the whole world conspires against it. I am going to tell them the truth about their Ministry of Justice. Werner Lampe, an old man who cries into his Bible now, an old man who profited by the property expropriation of every man he sent to the concentration camp. Friedrich Hofstetter, the good German who knew how to take orders, who sent men before him to be sterilized like so many digits. Emil Hahn, the decayed, corrupt bigot, obsessed by the devil within himself. And Ernst Janning, worse than any of them, because he knew what they were, and he went along with them. Ernst Janning, who made his life excrement because he walked with them.
Your Honors, it is my duty to defend Ernst Janning, and yet Ernst Janning has said he is guilty. There's no doubt he feels his guilt. He made a terrible mistake in going along with the Nazi movement, hoping it would be good for his country. But if he is to be found guilty, there are others who also went along who must also be found guilty. Herr Janning said we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Why did we succeed? What about the rest of the world, Your Honors? Did they not know the intentions of the Third Reich? Did they not hear the words of Hitler broadcast all over the world? Did they not read his intentions in Mein Kampf, published in every corner of the world? Where is the responsibility of the Soviet Union, who in 1939 signed a pact with Hitler and enabled him to make war? Are we now to find Russia guilty? Where is the responsibility of the Vatican, who signs a Concordat pact in 1933 with Hitler, giving him his first tremendous prestige? Are we now to find the Vatican guilty? Where is the responsibility of the world leader, Winston Churchill, who said in an open letter to the London Times in 1938, 1938, Your Honors, were England to suffer a national disaster, I should pray to God to send a man of the strength of mind and will of an Adolf Hitler. Are we now to find Winston Churchill guilty? Where is the responsibility of those American industrialists who helped Hitler to rebuild his arms and profited by that rebuilding? Are we to find the American industrialists guilty? No, Your Honor. Germany alone is not guilty. The whole world is as responsible for Hitler as Germany. It is easy to condemn one man in the dock. It is easy to condemn the German people, to speak of the basic flaw in German character that allowed Hitler to rise to power, and at the same time comfortably ignore the basic flaw of character that made Russians sign pacts with him. Winston Churchill praise him. American industrialists profit by him. Ernst Janning says he is guilty. If he is, Ernst Janning's guilt is the world's guilt. No more and no less.
What do you mean they won't let you have it? Well, you can commandeer them. We want every plane that can fly in the air. Tad, just a minute. Hello. I know there are some of them that don't know the territory. I know there are some that have never been to Berlin. Major, we have to give the military governor every help we can give him. We have to get 700 tons in the air a day. 700 tons. Oh, this airlift is some operation. We have to get 700 tons of produce to Berlin every day. Did you ever think we'd be flying coal and tomatoes in these crates? Tad, we've always been good friends, and that's why I called you in. I want to know what you're going to do in the courtroom tomorrow.
You know damn well what I'm going to do.
Now, here's the problem, Tad. Hitler knew what he was doing when he rehabilitated Germany. He marshaled every important industrialist, politician, military man, judge. You convict these men, you'll make communism look more attractive to the German people. You'll make them think of us as their persecutors.
You never cared for these trials, did you, Matt?
I wasn't what you call fond of them.
You never were fond of building an international criminal court, were you?
No, and I'll tell you why. We sometimes have to do things for our own security, or, if you will, our own interests. And I personally do not look forward to sitting as a defendant in a trial with those idiots at the UN as my prosecutor and judges. If you look at it that way, why not put Truman on trial for dropping the bomb?
Maybe we should.
I'll boil it down to this. We need the help of the German people. You don't get the support of the German people by giving their leaders stiff prison sentences.
This is supposed to be a new beginning, but it's a new end, isn't it?
If you want to be one of those responsible for our losing this struggle with the Soviet Union, think if you're going to be able to live with that. Tad, the thing to do is survive, isn't it? Survive as best we can.
Just for laughs, Matt. What was the war all about? What was it about? Defendant Emil Hahn prepared, signed, and circulated reports summarizing NN cases receiving the death penalty at the following special courts on September 1st, 1942. Kiel, 262 defendants from Norway. Essen, 863 defendants from Belgium and France. Cologne, 331 defendants from France. This concludes the documentary evidence. Your Honors, during the 3 years that have passed since the end of the war in Europe, mankind has not crossed over into Jordan. Small but terrible wars rage in Greece and Palestine, and the chorus of international voices is discordant. In our country, the fear of war has been revived, and we are constrained once more to look to our defenses. There is talk of Cold War, and meanwhile, men and women die in real wars, and echoes of persecutions and atrocities will not be stilled. These events cannot help but color what happens in the courtroom. But somewhere in the midst of these events, the responsibility for the crimes we have brought forward during this case must be placed in true perspective. This is the decision that faces your honors. It is the dilemma of our times. It is a dilemma that rests with your conscience.
The defendants will make their final statements. Frederick Hofstadter.
I have served my country throughout my life, and in whatever position I was assigned to, in faithfulness, with a pure heart, and without malice. I followed the concept I believe to be the highest in my profession. The concept that says, to sacrifice one's own sense of justice to the authoritative legal order. To ask only what the law is, and not if it is also unjust. As judge, I could do no other. I believe your honors will find me, and millions of Germans like me, who believe they were doing their duty to their country, to be not guilty.
Emil Hahn.
I will not say of our policy today that it was wrong when I said yesterday it was right. Germany was fighting for its life. Certain measures were needed to protect it from its enemies. I cannot say I am sorry we applied these measures. We were a bulwark against Bolshevism. We were a pillar of Western culture. A bulwark the West may yet wish to retain.
Werner Lempe.
Your honors. Your honors.
Ernst Jauning.
I have nothing to add to what I have already said.
The testimony has been received in the case. The final arguments have been heard. There remains only the task of the tribunal to render its decision. The record is closed. The tribunal will recess until further notification.
This is the last of the papers of the Night and Fog decree. Do you have any more than that, Ken?
Nope, that's all.
Now, I've collected some precedents here that bear on the basis of the case. The conflict between allegiance to international laws and the laws of one's country. That we have a mountain of stuff to go over here.
Yeah, what are you looking at, Dan?
I was just looking at the pictures attached to some of the warrants for arrest.
What pictures?
This is a picture of Peterson before they operated on him. Here's a picture of Maria Wallner. She really was 16 once. Mr. Feldenstein. Here, case of a boy. Must have been no more than 14. Executed for saying that the Reich might lose the war. Authorized by the jurisdiction of Frederick Hofstadter.
Now, I think you will find this more pertinent. This is from the French chief prosecutor before the International Military Tribunal. Now, he writes, It's obvious in states organized along modern lines that responsibility is confined to those who act directly for the states, since they alone are in a position to judge the legitimacy of the given orders. They alone can and should be prosecuted. I can't see that the prosecution has put forth a really clear-cut case against the defendants.
What about Janning's confession?
Regardless of the acts committed, I don't see how we can interpret it that the defendants were really responsible for crimes against humanity.
What do you think, Dan?
Ken, we've been going over these documents for 2 days. If it isn't clear by now, look at these precedents and opinions. Look at them if you're interested at all.
I'm interested, Curtis. You were speaking of crimes against humanity. You were saying these men were not responsible for them. I'd like you to explain that to me.
I've just been explaining it. I've been explaining it for 2 days.
Maybe. But all I've heard is legalistic double talk and rationalizations. Curtis, when I first became a judge, I knew there were certain people in the town I wasn't supposed to touch. I knew if I wanted to remain a judge, this was so. But how do you expect me to turn my back on millions of murders? How many we don't even really know?
I'm sure he doesn't mean that, Dan. There is, after
I'm
all,
not asking you to turn your back on them. I'm asking you, what good is it going to do us to pursue this policy?
Well, now we know how those men in the dock felt, don't we?
What do you mean, Dan?
They committed murders for the good of their country. Now it's being suggested that we let murderers go free for the good of our country. Is that it? I'll tell you something, Curtis. I'm afraid for all of us. How many future genocides will happen unless we draw a line right here?
There's a world outside this courtroom. Our country is in danger. That doesn't seem to mean too much to you.
Curtis, you're saying they weren't responsible. You're going to have to explain that to me. You're going to have to explain it to me very carefully.
The tribunal is in session. God save the United States of America and this honorable tribunal.
The trial conducted before this tribunal began over 6 months ago. Simple murders and atrocities do not constitute the gravamen of the charges in the indictment. Rather, the charge is that of conscious participation in a nationwide, government-organized system of cruelty and injustice, in violation of legal and moral principles common to all civilized nations. The tribunal has carefully reviewed the record and found therein abundant, competent evidence to support, beyond a reasonable doubt, the charges brought against these defendants. Herr Rolf, in his skillful defense, has asserted that there are others who must share the ultimate responsibility for what happened here in Germany. There is truth in this. This tribunal does not believe that the United States or any other country has been blameless of the conditions which made the German people vulnerable to the blandishments and temptations of the rise of Nazism. But this tribunal does say that the men in the dock are responsible for their acts. The principle of criminal law of every civilized society has this in common. Any person who sways another to commit murder, any person who furnishes the lethal weapon for the purpose of this crime, any person who is an accessory to this crime is guilty. Herr Rolf further asserts that the defendant Janning was an extraordinary jurist who was acting in what he thought to be the best interests of this country. There is truth in this also. Janning, to be sure, is a tragic figure. We believe he loathed the evil he did. But compassion for the present torture of his soul must not beget forgetfulness of the torture and death of millions by the government of which he was a part. Janning's record and his fate illuminate the most shattering truth that has emerged from this trial. If he and the other defendants were all depraved perverts, if all the leaders of the Third Reich were sadistic monsters and maniacs, these events would have no more moral significance than an earthquake or other natural catastrophes. But this trial has shown that under the stress of national crisis, ordinary men, even able and extraordinary men, can delude themselves into the commission of crimes and atrocities so vast and heinous as to stagger the imagination. No one who has sat through this trial can ever forget the sterilization of men because of their political beliefs, the murder of children, how easily that can happen. There are those in our country today, too, who speak of the protection of country, of survival. The answer to that is, survival as what? A country isn't a rock, and it isn't an extension of oneself. It's what it stands for when standing for something is the most difficult. Before the people of the world, let it now be noted in our decision here that this is what we stand for. Justice, truth, and the value of a single human being. Frederick Hofstadter, the tribunal finds you guilty of membership in criminal organizations and crimes against humanity and sentences you to life imprisonment. Emil Hahn, the tribunal finds you guilty of war crimes, membership in criminal organizations, and crimes against humanity, and sentences you to life imprisonment.
Today you sentence me. Tomorrow the Bolsheviks sentence you.
Werner Lampe, the tribunal finds you guilty of membership in criminal organizations and crimes against humanity, and sentences you to life imprisonment. Ernst Janning. Ernst Janning, the tribunal finds you guilty of crimes against humanity and sentences you to life imprisonment.
Justice Ives for the minority. I wish to point out strongly my dissenting vote from the decision of this tribunal, as stated by Justice Haywood, in which Justice Norris concurred. The issues of the actions of the defendants, who believe they were acting in the best interests of their country, is an issue that cannot be decided in a courtroom alone. It can only be decided objectively in years to come, in the true perspective of history.
Here is something for you to have on the plane.
Mrs. Halberstadt, if I take all the food you've given me, we won't have any room to pack anything else.
But it's strudel, George. So well you like it.
Thank you for everything.
Goodbye, Your Honor.
Goodbye. Oh, and give my regards to Mrs. Berthold. I tried calling her, but there wasn't any answer.
Yes, Your Honor, I will.
Give my regards to your young lady, Captain Byers.
That's one you owe me.
What do you mean?
Americans aren't very popular in Germany this morning. See you at the airport.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
I came here at the request of Ernst Janning. He wishes to see you.
I'm just leaving for the airport.
It's on the way. He said it would mean a great deal to him.
I'll try.
Thank you. Did you hear about the verdict in the IG Farben case, Judge? Most of them were acquitted. The others received light sentences. The verdict came in today.
No, I had not heard.
I'll make you a wager.
I don't make wagers.
A gentleman's wager. In 5 years, the men you sentenced to life imprisonment will be free.
Herr Rolf, I have admired your work in the courtroom for many months. You are a brilliant attorney. You will undoubtedly go very far. You are particularly brilliant in your use of logic. Therefore, I have no doubt that what you suggest may well happen. It is logical in view of the times in which we live. But to be logical is not to be right. And nothing on God's earth could ever make it right.
Herr Janning, someone to see you.
Herr Janning?
Judge Haywood, please, sit down.
You wish to see me?
Yes, there is something I want to give you. A record of my cases, the ones I remember the details of. I want to give it to someone I can trust.
Thank you. I'll take good care of it.
It won't do any good, but it is a record of what can happen. Judge Haywood, I know the pressures that must have been brought on you. Your verdict will not be a popular one. You will be criticized greatly. Nuremberg will not be a pleasant word for Germans for years to come. But if it means anything at all to you, you have the respect of at least one man you convicted. By all that is right in the world, your verdict was a just one.
Thank you. What you said in the courtroom, it needed to be said.
Judge Haywood, the real reason I asked you to come, I want to know, I want to hear it from a man like you. I want to hear, not that he forgives, but that he understands.
I understand the pressures that you faced. No man can say how he would have faced those pressures himself unless he'd actually been tested. But how can you expect me to understand sending millions of people to gas ovens?
I did not know it would come to that. You must believe me. You must believe me.
Herr Janning, it came to that the first time you sentenced to death a man you knew to be innocent.
By April 14, 1949, judgment was rendered in the last of the Nuremberg Trials. By 1959, of the 99 sentenced to prison terms, only 3 were still serving their sentences.